Hey everyone, this is Clay with Blend 360 bringing you another Power BI tip. This week I wanted to do a follow-up on my last video where I talked about Power Apps. In that video, kind of toward the end, I mentioned that you could further expand that report we looked at by adding things to it like Power Automate. So in this video, I wanted to take a look at how you can use Power Automate to enhance a Power BI report. So let me share my screen and we'll kind of look at a new report to see how that works. So in this report, it looks very similar to the one we did in the last video where you have just a simple BI report, but we also have a Power App embedded into this report. And so what we have with this one, this is based on travel requests. So this would be something that your employees would be submitting travel requests, travel information about company visits, client visits, those kind of things where you're tracking average hotel costs, airfare costs, whether the request has been approved, what hotel and airline we're staying, whatever data that you wanted to kind of collect on this. Works very similar to that other report where we have that, where we can edit that information in the Power App and we have it tied to a SharePoint list that has all of that information in it. So very similar to what we looked at last time, same way we build it based on that last app. So what we're looking at today is how do we look at this with a Power Automate addition to it. So what I wanted to talk about is how this whole process works from beginning to end about how the travel request information comes into this data set. So what we have is we have a Microsoft form that collects the data from the users. For example, your employees that are, I just got signed out. Look at there. All right, back in. So putting in the information like the travel request, like where we're going, what kind of visit it is, what's the purpose of the visit, starting and end dates, estimated cost of your flight, hotel, any other miscellaneous expenses, and food, hotel, or not food, but hotel, um, Uber, that kind of stuff, conferences, fees, whatever. And it's being populated into this SharePoint list. So here is where the Power Automate comes in. And before we kind of show you how that flow is built up, one of the cool things that you can see with Power Automate is if you go into Power Automate and search Power BI, there's all these different templates that are already built on how to use and integrate Power BI with a lot of different tools, but also with Power Automate. You can see things like Teams, things with Excel, triggering refreshes or triggering alerts, all a whole bunch of different kind of stuff. And you can use these templates to start with, or you can kind of build your own. But let's look at the flow that we're using for this report. And the way it starts out is, just like I mentioned, that form intakes information from the employees and it's added to that SharePoint list. So when that SharePoint list, when a new item is created in that SharePoint list, the flow is kind of triggered from that. And then it triggers a refresh to that data set. So as soon as that request is put in, this Power BI report that we have is refreshed to put in the information. And it's kind of sitting like in almost a pending situation of where the request has been made. So from that, it also picks up from the request based on the user's Office 365 profile. It picks up their manager and it sends a request email to the manager of that person to tell them, hey, we have a travel request. We need you to approve it or to not approve it. And that kind of is what the next step is it's sitting here. It's going to wait in that approval process to get a yes or no answer from the manager as to whether the request has been approved or not approved. And what this step also does is it picks up, you can kind of see here in the title of the email, it's a new travel request, what it's called, and it kind of goes into and has a link to the request and also shows the details for that request. And basically after that we're sitting and waiting on a condition to be completed. And either it's a yes or a no from the manager to approve the request. So from that, what you would get is a yes, and if yes, then it updates the request over here to be approved or not approved. And from there, so we get a if yes, then we update the item to approved, and it also sends an email notification out to the person who put it in and lets them know that, hey, your request has been approved. You can go ahead and book your flight, book your hotel, all that kind of stuff. If no, same response. It updates the SharePoint list to be a no, sends a notification to the person who put that request in and says, hey, your request is denied. You can either resubmit it, change your things, talk to your manager about what needs to happen. Maybe there's a restriction on travel right now for the organization. And then at the end, it also, after these conditions have been met and that change has happened, it refreshes that data set again so that the approval and all of that can be shown in the report. So from here, we would have all that information kind of be flowing in through Power Automate and triggering refreshes so that this information is as close to real time as it can be in that process. Now, with the Power Apps portion of this, let's just say that we had a visit that was going in and my manager was no longer, they were out. They were out for vacation, or they were no longer able to kind of do that. So as a manager's manager, somebody higher up the chain could go in and make these adjustments to whatever's going on. Maybe they say, well, okay, you can go, but we wanted to change this to you can only be here for a week or 5 days. Or if the approval hasn't been approved, then we can go ahead and approve that. So one of the things that we could do, for example, in this one is we could go over here and look at the reports that aren't the requests that aren't approved, and then try to go in here and find one and use that as a thing. So like here's one, approved as false. Okay, well, we need to approve this, but the manager is out of town. So we go in here and swap this to approved. Now, what would happen is all this is triggering, all this would automatically refresh. Now, the thing about the refreshes that you have to remember is the refreshes are going to be conditional to the licensing that you have in your Power BI workspace. So, there's for each license, there's so many refreshes that you can have in a day. So that's something to think about as well. If you're building something like that, this report may be limited in that way to where only a certain number of refreshes can be triggered based on your licensing and your workspace setup. So that's something to think about and designing your flow accordingly. So for example, kind of going back to this flow, if we have a limited number of refreshes, we may want to take out some of this, at least maybe one of these situations, to where it's only refreshed when the approval comes in, so that we have one less instance of a refresh so we can keep some of those for later on. Things to think about when you design that. But overall, this is a really cool way to integrate this stuff. And the great part about this is it takes tools from various parts of the Microsoft ecosystem. We're using forms, we're using a SharePoint list, we're using Power BI, and even Office 365 to get the manager's name and we're integrating in that and putting it all together in one place. And that's a really cool option that you can have and really design some really neat stuff to really enhance your reports. So my challenge to you guys is to go through Power Automate, look at all these different templates and tools that you can use to integrate Power BI with all this different stuff. Find a cool use case for it and let me know in the comments what you find, because it's like I said before, I'm always interested in learning and finding new ways to integrate stuff and really enhance Power BI reports. I hope you guys enjoyed this tip, and we'll see you next time.